You're sitting on your couch, the soft glow of a screen reflecting in your eyes, watching your dog sleep on the rug. Perhaps he's a golden retriever, a pug, or a mutt of 1,000 lineages. But in this moment, he is doing that thing all dogs do. His paws are twitching, his nose is wrinkling, and he's letting out those tiny muffled woofs that signal a chase in the theater of his mind. To you, this is a heartwarming domestic scene. It's a moment of peace, a testament to the comfort of your home. You see a pet, a companion whose greatest survival skill is knowing exactly which head tilt will earn him a piece of your sandwich. But if we were to peel back 40,000 years of history, to strip away the drywall of your house, the electricity in your wires, and the safety of your neighborhood, you would realize that this sleeping creature is not just a companion. He is a piece of evolutionary hardware. He is a biological radar that you have simply forgotten how to read. And more importantly, he is the only reason you are sitting there at all. Without that twitching creature at your feet, the human story would likely have ended in a cold, lonely cave in the foothills of the Alps or a forgotten valley in Siberia. We like to tell ourselves that we conquered the world because we were smart, because we had fire, or because we invented the spear. But the fossil record suggests a much darker, more fragile truth. We were a tropical primate, furless and weak, trying to survive a planetary-scale catastrophe called the Ice Age. We were being out-hunted, out-muscled, and outsensed by every other predator on Earth. We were a species on the brink. And then, we did the unthinkable. We merged with a monster. To understand why we needed the dog to survive, you first have to understand just how useless a solo human is in the wild. Imagine yourself 35,000 years ago. You are standing on a ridge in Central Europe. The wind is a physical blow, scraping against your skin with the force of 1,000 needles. You have a spear, yes. You have a fire, yes, but you are also biologically blind. Your sense of smell is a joke. You possess about 6 million olfactory receptors, which might help you tell if meat has gone bad, but it's useless for tracking a reindeer 5 miles away through a blizzard. Your hearing is limited to a narrow band of frequencies. You are deaf to the high-pitched ultrasonic rustle of a predator creeping through the dry grass behind you. And your eyes? Once the sun dips below the horizon, you are a victim. Your night vision is abysmal. In the absolute blackness of a prehistoric night, you aren't an apex predator. You are a protein bar in a leather wrap waiting to be found. During the Ice Age, the fear gradient was constant. Every time you fell into a deep sleep, you were gambling with your life. You had to stay awake to guard the fire, but the more you stayed awake, the more your cognitive functions declined. This is the primate trap. To be smart, we needed deep REM sleep to process information, but to sleep deeply was to be defenseless. This is where the anomaly begins. All around you, in the darkness beyond the firelight, were the wolves. At the time, they were the most successful land predators on the planet. They had everything we lacked. They could see through time using their noses, smelling where an animal had been 3 days ago. They could hear the heartbeat of a mouse under a foot of snow, and they could navigate the pitch-black woods with the confidence of gods. For millions of years, the relationship between primates and wolves was simple. They ate us, and we feared them. But something glitched in the engine of evolution. A small population of wolves began to hang around the edges of human camps. They weren't there to attack. They were there to scavenge. And a small population of humans didn't throw spears at them. They threw scraps of bone. This was the birth of the hybrid species. We didn't just tame an animal to be a tool like we did with horses or cattle much later. We formed a biological merger. We traded our scraps and our fire for their senses. The moment a human and a wolf dog began to sleep in the same space, the fear gradient vanished. The dog took over the sensory duties. He became the external radar that never turned off. With a dog at the mouth of the cave, the human could finally achieve something that had been impossible for 1,000,000 years. Deep, restorative, uninterrupted sleep. This extra sleep didn't just make us feel better. It allowed our brains to explode with creativity. It gave us the cognitive bandwidth to invent art, complex language, and better technology. We didn't win because we were stronger than the Neanderthals. We won because we were the only ones who figured out how to outsource our fear to another species. As you look back at that dog on your rug, understand that his twitching paws are the echo of a 40,000-year-old pact. Every human alive today is the descendant of a line of sapiens who were smart enough to make friends with the monster in the dark. We are a two-species miracle. But why did this work for us and not our stronger cousins, the Neanderthals? Why did we become the world's ultimate superorganism while they vanished into the frost? In the next chapter, we are going to look at the self-domestication glitch. We are going to find out how a handful of friendly wolves literally hacked our neurochemistry using the same love hormone that bonds a mother to her baby to turn themselves into our family. We are moving from the vulnerability of the primate to the chemistry of the pact. Well, we often imagine the first domestication of the dog as a cinematic moment of human bravery. A hunter finding a lone wolf pup in the snow, bringing it back to the tribe, and training it to be a soldier. We love this story because it places us in the role of the master, the architect of nature, but the reality is much stranger, much more accidental, and far more humbling. Humans didn't tame the wolf hacked the human. To understand how this happened, you have to look at the campfire not as a place of comfort, but as the world's first interspecies diner. 35,000 years ago, a human camp was a chaotic mess of resources. We were butchering megafauna, discarding marrow-rich bones, and leaving piles of protein-heavy waste just outside our living quarters. To a wild wolf, this was a biological goldmine, but there was a massive barrier to entry: fear. In the wild, fear is the primary survival mechanism. A normal, healthy wolf possesses a flight distance, a psychological radius that prevents it from getting within 100 yards of a human. If a wolf smells a human, its cortisol levels, the stress hormone, spike, and its brain screams, "Run." For millions of years, this fear kept our two species apart, but evolution is never uniform. In every wolf pack, there were individuals born with a glitch in their fear response. Due to natural genetic variation, some wolves had slightly lower cortisol levels. They were just a little bit braver, a little bit more curious, and a little bit more desperate. These were the peripheral wolves. They were the ones who realized that if they could ignore the terrifying smell of the human, they could eat the highest quality calories on the planet without ever having to hunt. This is what biologists call self-domestication. These wolves weren't chosen by us. They chose themselves by hanging around our garbage. And here is where the glitch becomes a revolution. In 1959, a Soviet scientist named Dmitry Belyaev decided to replicate this process with wild silver foxes. He didn't try to train them. He simply selected the 5% of foxes that showed the least amount of fear toward humans and allowed them to breed. The results were staggering. Within just 10 generations, the foxes didn't just become tame. They began to look like dogs. Their ears became floppy. Their tails started to curl and wag. Their snouts shortened, and white patches appeared on their fur. This is the domestication syndrome. It turns out that the same stem cells that determine an animal's adrenaline and fear response, the neural crest cells, are also responsible for the physical shape of the face, the ears, and the color of the coat. By selecting for friendliness, nature accidentally created a creature that looked more approachable, more juvenile, and more cute. The wolves at our campfires were literally melting. Their fierce, predatory masks were dissolving into the soft, expressive faces of our future partners. They were becoming biological infants in the eyes of the human brain. But the real pact wasn't written in the shape of their ears. It was written in the chemistry of our blood. As these proto-dogs moved from the periphery of the camp to the center of the hearth, they began to perform a neurochemical hijack. When you look into your dog's eyes today, your brain releases a massive dose of oxytocin, the same hormone that floods a mother's brain when she holds her newborn child. This is the love loop. Humans are biologically programmed to protect and care for anything that triggers this oxytocin response. The proto-dog had successfully bypassed our predator alert and moved directly into our family circuit. By the time the Ice Age reached its peak, we were no longer two separate species. We were a merger. The friendly wolf had traded its wildness for a steady supply of marrow, and in return, it gave the human something that no spear could ever provide: an emotional intelligence that could read our moods, our gazes, and our intentions. We had invited a master manipulator into our home, and we loved it for it. But this partnership wasn't just about feelings. It was about a total shift in the power dynamics of the planet. While we were bonding with our new dogs, our cousins, the Neanderthals, were still hunting alone. They were still staring into the dark with only their own limited eyes. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the Neanderthal mystery. We're going to find out why the stronger human species, who had survived in Europe for 300,000 years, vanished almost immediately after we arrived with our four-legged force multiplier. We're moving from the chemistry of the pact to the war for the planet. We often imagine the first domestication of the dog as a cinematic moment of human bravery, a hunter finding a lone wolf pup in the snow, bringing it back to the tribe, and training it to be a soldier. We love this story because it places us in the role of the master, the architect of nature, but the reality is much stranger, much more accidental, and far more humbling. Humans didn't tame the wolf hacked the human. To understand how this happened, you have to look at the campfire not as a place of comfort, but as the world's first interspecies diner. 35,000 years ago, a human camp was a chaotic mess of resources. We were butchering megafauna, discarding marrow rich bones, and leaving piles of protein heavy waste just outside our living quarters. To a wild wolf, this was a biological goldmine, but there was a massive barrier to entry: fear. In the wild, fear is the primary survival mechanism. A normal, healthy wolf possesses a flight distance, a psychological radius that prevents it from getting within 100 yards of a human. If a wolf smells a human, its cortisol levels, the stress hormone, spike, and its brain screams, run. For millions of years, this fear kept our two species apart. But evolution is never uniform. In every wolf pack, there were individuals born with a glitch in their fear response. Due to natural genetic variation, some wolves had slightly lower cortisol levels. They were just a little bit braver, a little bit more curious, and a little bit more desperate. These were the peripheral wolves. They were the ones who realized that if they could ignore the terrifying smell of the human, they could eat the highest quality calories on the planet without ever having to hunt. This is what biologists call self-domestication. These wolves weren't chosen by us. They chose themselves by hanging around our garbage. And here is where the glitch becomes a revolution. In 1959, a Soviet scientist named Dmitry Belyaev decided to replicate this process with wild silver foxes. He didn't try to train them. He simply selected the 5% of foxes that showed the least amount of fear toward humans and allowed them to breed. The results were staggering. Within just 10 generations, the foxes didn't just become tame. They began to look like dogs. Their ears became floppy. Their tails started to curl and wag. Their snouts shortened, and white patches appeared on their fur. This is the domestication syndrome. It turns out that the same stem cells that determine an animal's adrenaline and fear response, the neural crest cells, are also responsible for the physical shape of the face, the ears, and the color of the coat. By selecting for friendliness, nature accidentally created a creature that looked more approachable, more juvenile, and more cute. The wolves at our campfires were literally melting. Their fierce, predatory masks were dissolving into the soft, expressive faces of our future partners. They were becoming biological infants in the eyes of the human brain. But the real pact wasn't written in the shape of their ears. It was written in the chemistry of our blood. As these proto-dogs moved from the periphery of the camp to the center of the hearth, they began to perform a neurochemical hijack. When you look into your dog's eyes today, your brain releases a massive dose of oxytocin, the same hormone that floods a mother's brain when she holds her newborn child. This is the love loop. Pistes, humans are biologically programmed to protect and care for anything that triggers this oxytocin response. The proto-dog had successfully bypassed our predator alert and moved directly into our family circuit. By the time the Ice Age reached its peak, we were no longer two separate species. We were a merger. The friendly wolf had traded its wildness for a steady supply of marrow, and in return, it gave the human something that no spear could ever provide: an emotional intelligence that could read our moods, our gazes, and our intentions. We had invited a master manipulator into our home, and we loved it for it. But this partnership wasn't just about feelings. It was about a total shift in the power dynamics of the planet. While we were bonding with our new dogs, our cousins, the Neanderthals, were still hunting alone. They were still staring into the dark with only their own limited eyes. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the Neanderthal mystery. We're going to find out why these stronger human species who had survived in Europe for 300,000 years vanished almost immediately after we arrived with our four-legged force multiplier. We're moving from the chemistry of the pact to the war for the planet. Take a deep breath. Right now, through your nose, you are pulling in a stream of air that contains 1,000 different chemical stories. You can smell the faint aroma of the coffee you drank an hour ago, the scent of the laundry detergent on your shirt, perhaps the musk of your own skin. To you, this is a minor background hum of information. Your nose is a secondary tool, a biological afterthought compared to the high-definition cinematic world provided by your eyes. We are visual primates. We live in a world of light, but for the creature lying at your feet, the world doesn't look like a picture. It looks like a chemical map. Your dog possesses up to 300 million olfactory receptors in his nose. You have 6 million. To put that in perspective, if a human sense of smell is like being able to see a single candle in a dark room, a dog's sense of smell is like being able to see every single light in a major city from an airplane. Your dog doesn't just smell food, he smells time. He can smell who was standing on this patch of grass 3 hours ago, which direction they were headed, and whether they were afraid or healthy. He can smell the future by catching a scent on a breeze from a mile away. When we formed the pact with the dog, we didn't just get a companion. We performed a sensory graft. We effectively outsourced our weakest senses to a biological specialist. For most of our evolution, humans had to spend a massive amount of mental energy trying to process the sounds and smells of the dark. We had to be on high alert every second, scanning the periphery for the snap of a twig or the scent of a predator. But once the dog moved into the human camp, our brains underwent a radical sensory deloading. We realized that we didn't have to listen to the dark anymore. The dog was doing it for us. Consider the ultrasonic shield. Your hearing is capped at roughly 20,000 MHz. A dog's hearing goes up to 45,000 Hz. They can hear the high-pitched chitter of a rodent in the grass or the soft, ultrasonic click of a leopard's joints as it prepares to pounce, sounds that are fundamentally silent to the human ear. By having a dog standing guard, the ancient human was granted the greatest luxury in the history of our species, the ability to turn off. This leads to the REM sleep revolution. To build the kind of brain that can invent calculus, write symphonies, or build spacecraft, you need a very specific kind of rest. You need deep, uninterrupted REM sleep. This is the stage where the brain rewires itself, where it processes complex data and solidifies memories. Before the dog, humans were light sleepers by necessity. We had to be ready to wake up and fight at a moment's notice. Our sleep cycles were fragmented, nervous, and shallow. But with the biological radar of the dog patrolling the perimeter, sapiens could finally descend into the deep, restorative, heavy sleep that is the prerequisite for high-level intelligence. We didn't become the smartest species because we had a bigger brain. We became the smartest because the dog allowed us to finally get a good night's rest. But the outsourcing went even deeper. Because we no longer needed to maintain the massive neural infrastructure required for a wolf-like sense of smell or hyperacute hearing, our brains began to reallocate that energy. We traded our olfactory bulbs for an expanded prefrontal cortex. We literally sacrificed our nose to grow our imagination. This is the biological merger in its most literal form. And we changed our own hardware to accommodate the dog. We became a species that specialized in looking and thinking because we had a partner that specialized in smelling and hearing. This sensory partnership didn't just keep us safe at night, it made us the most efficient ghost predators the world had ever seen. Because a human and a dog can communicate through silence, through a gaze or a gesture, we could hunt in total secrecy. The dog would find the prey, the human would execute the kill, and both would share the spoils. But this efficiency led to a new, unexpected problem. For the first time in our history, we were killing too much. We were generating a protein surplus. And as we will see in the next chapter, this surplus was the economic engine that allowed humanity to stop being animals and start being civilized. We're moving from the biological radar to the engine of surplus. We're going to find out how the dog didn't just save our lives, it funded our future. Imagine the math of a typical day for a solo human hunter before the dog arrived. You wake up in a state of caloric deficit. Every movement you make, every step through the snow, every climb up a ridge, every toss of a practice spear is a withdrawal from your body's bank account. To stay alive, you need to find a high-energy payout. But hunting is a low-probability game. Even the best human hunters, using the most advanced stone-tipped spears, likely failed more often than they succeeded. In the wild, almost catching a deer is the same as catching nothing at all. It is a zero-sum game of desperation. But once the dog entered the equation, the economics of survival underwent a total systemic shift. This wasn't just a small improvement, it was the birth of the protein surplus. Data from modern-day indigenous hunting groups like the Tizimane in the Amazon or hunters in the Siberian tundra reveals a startling statistic. Hunters who use dogs are nearly 30 to 40% more efficient than those who hunt alone. They find prey faster, they track it more reliably, and they successfully kill it more often. In the brutal world of the Ice Age, a 30% increase in efficiency isn't just a bonus. It is the difference between a dying tribe and a thriving civilization. For the first time in our 2 million year history, humans began to consistently have too much. We had more meat than we could eat in a single sitting. We had a surplus of fats, proteins, and calories. And in the world of biology, a surplus of energy is the rocket fuel for complexity. Your brain is the most expensive organ in the known universe. It accounts for only 2% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of your daily calories. It is a biological furnace that requires a constant, high quality stream of fuel to function. By providing the protein surplus, the dog effectively subsidized the evolution of the human mind. We didn't have to spend every waking second worrying about the next meal because the four-legged hunters had guaranteed our security. This surplus led to the greatest luxury in human history: leisure. When you aren't starving, you have time. Time to sit by the fire and wonder about the stars. Time to carve a piece of ivory into the shape of a woman. Time to walk into the deepest, darkest chambers of a cave and paint a stampede of bison on the limestone walls. Art, music, religion, and complex mythology, the things we think of as the human soul, were all paid for by the calories provided by the dog. We didn't think our way into being human. We fed our way there, and the dog was the one holding the check. But the dog's economic contribution didn't stop at the hunt. Long before we domesticated the horse, the ox, or the donkey, the dog was our first beast of burden. Sapiens was a migratory species. We were always on the move, pushing into new territories, crossing mountain ranges, and eventually traversing the land bridge into the Americas. But a human can only carry so much. We were limited by the weight of our tents, our tools, and our children. The dog changed the geography of the possible. By using primitive travois, sled-like frames dragged along the ground, a pack of dogs could carry hundreds of pounds of supplies. They allowed entire human populations to move deeper into the Arctic, across the Siberian wastes, and into the New World. We didn't walk across the planet. We were hauled across it by a species that was stronger and more durable than we were. This is the invader strategy. The Sapiens-Dog Alliance was a colonial force of nature. We were a two-species superorganism that could travel further, stay warmer, and hunt better than anything else on Earth. We were the masters of the surplus. But as we grew more dependent on each other, our communication had to evolve. We couldn't just be partners in a business. We had to be family in a pack. To make this work, we had to develop a way to read each other without making a sound. We had to create a silent, visual language that bridged the gap between a primate brain and a wolf brain. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the white-eye pact. We're going to find out why humans are the only primates with whites in their eyes and how we use that single biological feature to give silent commands to our four-legged partners. We're moving from the engine of surplus to the language of the gaze. Stop for a moment and look into the eyes of your dog. If he's sitting close enough, you'll notice something that we rarely stop to think about, but it is one of the most significant biological anomalies in the animal kingdom. Around his dark, liquid pupil, there is very little white. In a dog, the sclera, the tough outer coat of the eyeball, is mostly pigmented. This is the standard rule for almost every predator on Earth. From the wolf to the tiger to the eagle, the eyes are designed to be hidden. They are dark, masked, and camouflaged. In the wild, your eyes are a liability. If a predator has white sclera, it gives away two things it can never afford to reveal: its gaze and its intent. A dark eye allows a wolf to look at a specific deer without the deer knowing exactly where the wolf is focused. It is the ultimate tool for a silent stalker. But then, look into a mirror. You are the great biological exception. Humans are the only primates on this planet with large, brilliant white sclera. Our eyes are anti-camouflaged. We are essentially wearing a pair of high-contrast biological flashlights on our faces that tell everyone exactly what we are looking at. For a long time, evolutionary biologists were baffled by this. Why would a vulnerable primate evolve a feature that makes it impossible to hide its thoughts? The answer is the cooperative eye hypothesis. We didn't evolve white eyes to hide from our enemies. We evolved them so our friends could see us. In a world of high-stakes cooperation, the ability to point with your eyes was a revolutionary advantage. It allowed us to coordinate a hunt or a defense without making a sound. And while we were developing this silent language of the gaze, our new partner, the proto-dog, was evolving to listen to it. If you give a wolf a puzzle it can't solve, like a box with meat inside that is locked tight, the wolf will try to solve it with brute force. It will bite, scratch, and eventually give up. It never looks at a human for help. But if you give the same puzzle to a dog, even a puppy, it performs a radical cognitive maneuver. After a few failed attempts, it will stop, sit back, and look directly into your eyes. This is not training. This is a fundamental rewiring of the canine brain. Dogs are the only non-primates on Earth that have mastered the human gaze. They don't just look at your hands to see if you have food. They look at your face to see what you are thinking. They are the only species that instinctively understands that your eyes are a window into your intentions. During the Ice Age, this white-eye pact turned the human-dog pair into a silent, telepathic hunting machine. Imagine a hunter and his dog tracking a herd through a thick, fog-choked valley. Shouting is out of the question. It would scatter the prey, but they don't need to shout. The hunter only needs to shift his eyes toward a specific ridge. The dog sees the white of the hunter's sclera move, follows the direction of the gaze, and immediately breaks into a run to flank the target. We didn't just share our campfires, we shared our theory of mind. We invited another species to participate in our internal world. This level of synchronization is why the sapiens-dog merger was so much more lethal than the lone Neanderthal. We had a partner that could read us before we even spoke. This gaze following isn't just about hunting, it is the foundation of our emotional bond. When a dog looks into your eyes, he isn't just begging. He is engaging in a cross-species mirroring. In 2015, a study by Takefumi Nagasawa found that when dogs and humans gaze into each other's eyes, both experience a massive, simultaneous spike in oxytocin, the cuddle hormone that bonds a mother to her newborn. The dog has effectively hacked the human caregiving system. By looking at us with those expressive, vulnerable eyes, framed by muscles that allow them to raise their eyebrows in a way wolves cannot, they trigger an ancient mammalian response that makes it impossible for us to treat them as just tools. We began to treat them as kin. We began to treat them as us. This is the silent language that allowed our ancestors to bridge the gap between two different ways of being. And we stopped seeing the wolf as a monster and began seeing it as a brother. We didn't just coexist, we fused. Our identities became intertwined. And as this bond deepened, we moved from the economy of the hunt into something much more profound. And we began to mourn them. We began to realize that a dog wasn't just a radar or a hunter, it was a soul that could be lost. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the first tier. We are going to explore the 14,000-year-old grave of a sick puppy and find out the exact moment sapiens stopped being a primate and became the human we recognize today. We're moving from the language of the gaze to the birth of interspecies love. When your dog gets sick today, you likely don't think twice about the logic of helping him. You call the vet, you buy the medication, you sit on the floor with him and offer water from a bowl, and you stay up through the night listening to his breathing. To you, this is a moral imperative. He is a member of your family. But in the cold, brutal calculus of the Paleolithic, where every scrap of meat was a hard-won victory and every calorie spent on a non-productive mouth was a step closer to starvation, this behavior should have been impossible. For most of history, nature has been a world of utility. If a tool is broken, you discard it. If a hunting partner can no longer run, they are left behind. That was the law of the frost. But in 1914, in a basalt quarry in Oberkassel, Germany, archaeologists unearthed a grave that shattered this clinical view of our ancestors. Inside the grave, they found the remains of a man in his 40s and a woman in her 20s, but tucked between them, resting in the same red ochre-stained earth, were the bones of a dog. It was a puppy, barely 7 months old. At first, scientists thought it was just a ritual sacrifice, a tool buried to help the humans in the afterlife. But when they performed a forensic analysis on the puppy's teeth, they discovered a story that was much more haunting. The puppy had contracted canine distemper, a lethal morbillivirus, when it was only 19 weeks old. For a wild wolf, this would have been the end. Distemper causes violent seizures, high fevers, and devastating gastrointestinal distress. A puppy with distemper cannot hunt. It cannot guard the camp. It cannot even walk. It is, by every biological definition, a resource drain. And yet, the tooth enamel showed that this puppy didn't die at 19 weeks. It survived 2 more severe bouts of the disease. It lived for 8 more weeks in a state of total, trembling vulnerability. Think about what that survival required 14,000 years ago. This puppy had to be kept warm in a world of ice. It had to be hand-fed pre-chewed meat. Its mouth had to be cleaned of the viral discharge. It had to be carried as the tribe moved from camp to camp. This was intensive 24-hour nursing care. The people of Bonn Oberkassel weren't keeping this dog because it was a good hunter. They were keeping it because they loved it. They had crossed a psychological Rubicon. They had moved from cooperation to compassion. They had reached across the species barrier and decided that the life of this sick, useless animal was worth their own precious energy. This is the moment sapiens truly became human. We are the only species on this planet that consistently cares for the sick and the weak of other species. This interspecies empathy is our defining trait. We didn't just domesticate the dog's body, we domesticated the human heart. The Bonn Oberkassel burial is the first recorded tear in the history of our partnership. It proves that by the end of the Ice Age, the dog was no longer an external sensory organ or a force multiplier. It was a person. It was a someone. Well, when the puppy finally died, they didn't toss its body into the woods for the scavengers. They laid it in the earth with the same reverence and sorrow they showed for their own kin. This emotional merger was the final piece of the puzzle. It ensured that the pact would never be broken. Because we didn't just need dogs to survive, we had come to need them to feel whole. We had created a shared culture. We had become a hybrid superorganism where the grief of one species was felt by the other. As the glaciers finally began to retreat and the world warmed, this bond didn't fade. It only deepened. We moved out of the caves and into the first cities, and the dog walked right beside us. We changed the world, but in the process, the dog changed us. In our final chapter, we are going to look at the echo of this partnership. We are going to ask the final existential question. After 40,000 years of coevolution, what are we now? Are we still just sapiens, or are we something else entirely, a species that can no longer be defined without the wolf? We are moving from the first tier to the hybrid species. Look back at your dog on the rug one last time. He's waking up now. He stretches, lets out a long vocal yawn, and trots over to you, thumping his tail against your leg. He looks up at you, waiting for a signal, a word, or just a glance. In this mundane, quiet moment, you are witnessing the most successful biological merger in the history of the Earth. You aren't just a human looking at a pet, you are one half of a 40,000-year-old superorganism that has reshaped the very face of the planet. We started this journey asking a simple question. Why would ancient humans have died without dogs? The answer, as we've seen, isn't found in a single event, but in a total systemic transformation. We didn't just use dogs, we integrated them into our very definition of what it means to be alive. We are a hybrid species. From the moment the first peripheral wolf stepped into the light of a sapiens campfire, our two lineages ceased to be separate. We became a mosaic. Think about the sheer scale of the outsourcing we've performed. We gave the dog our nose, and in return, we grew a brain that could map the stars. We gave the dog our ears, and in return, we developed a voice that could tell stories about the beginning of time. We gave the dog our vigilance, and in return, we gained the deep, restorative sleep that allowed us to dream of a better future. If we were to remove the dog from the human story, the result wouldn't just be a slightly less efficient hunter. It would be a different version of humanity altogether. Without the dog, we might still be that light sleeper in the cave, nervous and fragmented, our intelligence capped by the constant pressure of the fear gradient. We might have remained a localized species, unable to conquer the Arctic or the Americas. We might have stayed solitary, like the Neanderthals, never developing the massive, interconnected social webs that define our modern world. In a very real, biological sense, there is no such thing as a pure human. Our evolution has been a collaborative project. We are the architects of the dog's soul, having selected for their friendliness and their ability to read our eyes. But they are the architects of our success. We didn't conquer the Ice Age. We co-conquered it. We didn't survive the dark. We shared it. This is the echo of the pact. It lives in the 2% Neanderthal DNA you carry, the legacy of the war for the planet that we won with our four-legged partners. It lives in the oxytocin that floods your brain when you pet a dog, the chemical bond that was forged in the blood and snow of the Paleolithic. It lives in the very structure of your eyes, with their bright white sclera designed to communicate with a partner that has been watching you for 1,000 generations. But this partnership carries an existential weight. We have made the dog what it is. We have bred them to be dependent on us, to love us more than they love their own kind, and to see us as the sun around which their world orbits. We have a responsibility to the wolf that stayed. Every dog in a shelter, every puppy waiting by a door, is a reminder of the debt we owe to the species that gave up its wildness to ensure our survival. They are the only species on Earth that chose us. Every other domestic animal, the cow, the pig, the horse, was forced into our service, but the dog walked in of its own accord. It saw the fire ape and decided that the risk of our spears was worth the warmth of our hearth. As you head for the door to take your dog for a walk, understand that you are participating in a ritual that is as old as civilization itself. You are stepping out into the world with your external sensory organ. You are walking with your radar. You are walking with the ghost of the wolf that didn't eat your ancestors. The ice age is over. The mammoths are gone. The Neanderthals are a memory written in bone and dust. But the pact remains. We are the survivors. We are the ones who didn't stay alone in the dark. The question is no longer why did we need them to survive? The question is, now that we have the world, what is a human without a dog to remind us of where we came from? Nature doesn't have a hospital. It only has us, and we only have them.